Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our CombiBiz webinar on open science and data sharing. My name is Sylvia Schreiber. I'm from the CombiBiz media panel, and I will navigate you through our webinar. I welcome very warmly Stephane Berghmans and Federica Rosetta, our two experts on open science and data sharing. They come from the Elsevier academic relations section. Stephane is veterinary medicine by profession, very close to bioeconomy. He has taught and investigated at Harvard Medical School and in Cambridge, UK, on drug discovery issues. He's changed then to science policy and was a member of European Science Foundation. And since 2013, he is the director of academic relations based in Brussels from the Elsevier publishing house. With him is Federica Rosetta. She's also from the academic relations in Elsevier, and Federica has a publishing background. She has studied literature, press and publishing history, and she is very knowledgeable and expertise savvy in data innovation, citizen science, and open access, and also alternative metrics. All these things which are around open science. And what's behind, I will tell you in a flash mode presentation on 7 points. New slide, please, James. 7 things you should know on open science. Open science is one of 3 O's: open science, open innovation, and open to the world. The 3 O's come from the EU's vision in research policy, and they are opening academia to new groups. Open science came up with online publishing. Open science is about data sharing, data platforms, and data clouds. Open science is about open access to scientific results, to new user groups globally. Open science stands also for new metrics beyond the mere citation indices. And open science is open for real impact and monitoring, which matters most to bioeconomy. So over to you, Stephane, please.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, and thank you for coming. So yes, let's go to this first slide. And very happy to be able to give you today a perspective on open science and data sharing from a publisher. But I should say that I'm not really talking from the publisher's side. I was recently at a conference in Paris organized by INRA, and I was introduced by someone there, and they insisted, saying that Elsevier was not a publisher, or at least was not a publisher anymore. It's more a technology company, big data company, that provides services to researchers. So I think that in that context, open science is exactly what we're talking about. So next slide, please. As you most probably know, if you're a researcher like me, the world of research is changing. The way research is done today compared to when I was doing my postdoc has changed drastically. So you have new technologies, new tools, definitely. Those are helping us to be more efficient, certainly more collaborative, also more productive. Hopefully that will have an impact on science, with indeed more impact on society, and hopefully will help us address societal challenges. So what are the key drivers behind this science, behind open science? Well, certainly, as I mentioned already, innovation and technology, much more collaboration between researchers, and some would say, fortunately, some others will say, unfortunately, increasing the assessment of the impact of research. Next slide, please. So, the open science is indeed leading to new research solutions. We've talked about the technology, we've talked about more collaboration. Open science is also about more openness, more transparency, and all this is leading at Elsevier to a suite of solutions, of platforms, of different initiatives that aim to help researchers. And as you can see here at the bottom, by the way, the colors are completely off, so sorry for this awful set of colors. But it's a whole series of different aspects that are facets that are involved in open science. We're talking about open data and research data management. We're talking open access. We're talking sharing, collaboration. It's also the metrics research integrity, and finally, importantly for me also, the connection between science and society. We don't have the time today to go into everything, so we decided to focus on open data, open access, and a little bit of the sharing. So next slide, please. Let me start right away with the open access aspect. So in 2015, and we're waiting right now for the numbers for 2016. But in 2015, more than 2 million articles were published still under the subscription model, while just almost 500,000 were published in open access. So what it means is you have this graph right there showing you the progression for both for subscription. So 82% of the total content of scientific publishing in 2015 were still under subscription. But you can see that growing a little faster is the open access content. So you have today, in 2015, about 18% of the total share of content that was in open access. So what does it mean for a publisher like us at Elsevier? Well, in 2015, we received more than 1.4 million manuscripts. And of these, we published almost 400,000 in our books and our journals. And this includes more than 20,000 that were published in open access, either in the open access journals we have or in the hybrid journals. Next slide, please. So we do have, indeed, at Elsevier, we offer the solution, whatever the solution the authors want to go with. It can be gold, open access. Just as a reminder, this is a system by which authors pay an open access publishing fee to see their accepted articles made immediately and permanently open access. And you also have the green open access, by which after publication acceptance in a subscription journal and after a delayed period of time called the embargo period, authors can post their manuscript to an institutional repository for public use. We also have other solutions, next slide please, that help with access. It can be helping institutional repositories or, for example, bigger repositories like OpenAir with APIs that allow them to fetch those the data on those articles. But we also, and I don't have the time to go to the whole details, but we have different programs such as Research for Life that provide access to 6,000 institutions in the third world for free to researchers over there, or a system that might interest some of you, postdoc free access passport, that when you're in transition after your PhD or postdoc, it allows you to actually have access for free to the content in Science Direct. Next slide. There's also what I love is called share links. It's the fact that if you publish with Elsevier, we provide you with a link that you can share with anyone, your grandmother, your colleagues, via email, on your website, or via social media, for example. And for 50 days after you publish, it provides free access to anyone who clicks on that link and can access your article. Next slide, please. A lot of innovation also going on in the field of open access in the publishing world. So this is one example from Elsevier, and it is a big trend you're seeing now, the mega journals. The most well-known is probably PLOS ONE. We have one too, it's called Helion. So this is a place where you can publish every technically sound paper across all disciplines. It's also a testbed for us for innovation, where we experiment with new platforms and testing new ways to improve the author and reader experience. It offers also two choices of Creative Commons, including the CC BY. Next slide. So here I'll hand over to Federica, who's going to tell you more about innovation in open access, but also about data, the other topic today.
Okay, thank you, Stephane, and good morning, everybody. Indeed, when we talk about innovation in publishing, and specifically open access, we need also to talk about research data articles and journals. So these are publication outlets that give the researchers the opportunity to publish raw data, results of data analysis, models, protocol, methods, even software and videos. Why is this important? It's very important because we know by talking to researchers and the academic community. The researchers, for instance, when it comes to methods, they spend most of their research time on validating, tweaking, and improving existing methods. So there is a great opportunity here for researchers to receive credit of all the work they've done on the lab, but also it's a great tool, a great way to make sure the research objects that are at the very beginning of the research process can be already discoverable. And this is key when we talk about open data. Next slide, please. So if we talk about open data is core to the mission in open science to make science more reproducible and transparent. So in line with what are the FAIR principles for data, so data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, we do believe that to get to this point, we need really to create an ecosystem that brings to highly effective research data management. So what we see now is at the moment, there's quite a fragmented scenario when it comes to storing and sharing data. What we have visualized in this slide, it's a pyramid. It's a pyramid that tells what are all the steps that are required to get really to the point of successful reusable data. It functions a little bit as a roadmap, if you want. So if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you see that, of course, the first step is making sure that data are stored and preserved in repositories, for instance, and that's why we know the institutions are already making sure that data management plans are in place. But this is not enough. Store and preserve it is just the first step. To move along and make sure the data really are open data and can be reproduced, we need to make sure that they are shared in the proper way. And that's where we're working into assigning to data DOI or accession numbers, where we are, for instance, introducing data journals, as I just explained, or making sure that data are linked to the article. But it's also where we are making also sure that data are citable, so that also researchers, when they share the data, they receive the credit for having done so. The next step is to make sure the data are trustworthy. So if they need to be reused, of course, researchers need to trust the source. So that's where there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that data have their provenance. The provenance is clear, and they have clear metadata associated. But also, not to forget, data must be searchable and findable, because we can have all this data stored in data repositories, they can be in journals, but if there is not an easy way to find data, then basically we are lost in an ocean of data. Next slide, please. So when it comes to Elsevier, what we are done, we are really started to work together with academic communities in thinking along with the academic communities to create solutions that really address all the steps of the effective data management, so that ensure that data can be easily stored, easily made accessible, and easily made reproducible. And not only we work with the academic community, but we are also working with a number of working groups. I just mentioned, for instance, the Research Data Alliance, which is the best known, I say. We're working together with them to define what are the commons and the principles that should be underlying an ecosystem on research data. Next slide, please. Just to give you just a few examples of the type of services we are thinking of and we have already put in place. iBench, it's an electronic lab notebook. So it's an easy option for researchers for storing the observation and the results of experiments, and wants to be an alternative to a recurrent trend, which is for researchers to store their results as of observation using simply Microsoft Word or Excel or paper notebooks. So this is really to make sure that we are very efficient. Research can be very efficient from the very beginning, from the very moment when they start their research plan, and they can capture the initial observations. Next slide, please. From the electronic lab notebook, data can easily be stored in the Mendeley data repository. This is a repository that is that links automatically the data with the published papers, or for instance with GitHub. What is really added functionalities here is that there is such clear indication about the versioning and the provenance of the data, and also allow researchers to choose which type of Creative Commons license they believe it's the best suited for their data. Next slide, please. So what I said before, data search is actually quite key and fundamental when we come to research data management. It's probably one of the most difficult pieces to develop, and that's because there is at the moment not really a data search that function across all data. Researchers tend to use a generic web search to look for the data that they need. But this, of course, it's not really tailor-made to their needs and doesn't give really refined type of results. So what we've done, we are really created a first beta version. It's already online. You can actually access that. And please also, we are waiting for feedback of improvement. And we are linking to a number of external repositories to make sure that we are developing a very good, well-functioning data search across all disciplines. Next slide, please. I think there is one before. There is one slide before. Oh,
is it missing or?
Yeah, just move then to the next one. Thank you. Well, I will just conclude. I don't know why it doesn't appear, but just to conclude, of course, when it comes to data, open data, Elsevier, it's very much the principle is that data should be made available, open and available as much as possible for the reproducibility purpose. So you will always find that data are published alongside the articles, and even though if the article is not open access, the data will be always made accessible and open for everybody to access and use. And from here, I move to Stephane, and Stephane can tell you more about, the importance of not only data sharing, but sharing in general, so broader than that. Stephane?
Thank you. Stephane?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, so let me move then, as Fede was mentioning, to social networks, big data, as I was mentioning before, and how your sharing can be very useful to help you actually do your research faster. Can I have the previous slide? Yeah, the previous. This is a page where you're going to see my Mendeley profile. And you can see from the tabs on top, data is one thing you can share, as mentioned by Federica. But also my library, I can share with others some of the articles that I've read or that I want to read, etc. Where I think it becomes really interesting is that this sharing, this usage can be used because it's big data. And what I'm going to focus on is not the statistics, like, for example, your H-index, the number of citations, etc., but really the suggestion. So if we move to the next slide, what you can see is, I don't know if you know this, but for the researchers out there, you spend more than 24% of your time actually looking for information. So if we can help you reduce that, you can spend more time on your research. So this is a feature of Mendeley that goes into your library and looks at all the papers you have in there, uses an algorithm to feed you back suggestions on what you might be interested to read. And so it can be based on all the articles that you have in your library. Next slide, please. But it can also be based on, as you see at the bottom, based on your research interest. So I define personally my profile, science policy, science strategy, open science. But it can also be, as listed there, the most recently added to my library, or what's popular in my discipline, what is trending in my discipline. I can also specifically upload articles that will reflect my current research, and from there then get suggestion helping me sort out through all these articles out there. When I started my postdoc, the p53 gene I was working on, there was 75,000 papers written on it. I didn't know where to start. Today I would have a tool like this one. So next slide, please. So as you can see, the other feature also that's quite useful in Mendeley that was started just in November is Mendeley groups. Here what you have is that you can create a virtual group with people to exchange, to share papers, to share data, to talk about a topic. This is one I'm part of, research data sharing. But the simplest way of thinking about this in the research world is you can create a virtual journal club, for example. So that is available too. So next slide, please. So what I'd like to finish with is to insist on the fact that what Elsevier in our industry is doing is really entering the online community publishing era. Publishing is there since the 1600s. Now you have the social network, and if you combine the two, you can create a social network of science that will help manage your data, showcase your work, and evaluate your impact, will help you collaborate, etc. And then final slide, please, next one. We've been used here to, and next 3 or 4, what we see here is that we're moving away from just the article, as it was linked also with the journal. This was the publishing cluster. Today we can link the article and journals directly to the researchers themselves, as authors, as editors, as readers. So that's really a usage cluster. But beyond that, there's a network that includes institutions, universities, but also funding bodies. You can link up with patents, know what's happening in innovation, or grants also. Next, please. And this is really defining what some people will call the Internet of Things, but what I like to call the Internet of Research next. And it's really going to be in the future about network and how those networks are going to help the world of research do their research more efficiently. Next. So with that, I'll stop right there, and I'll thank you very much, and we'll be very happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephane. Thank you very much, Federica, for this very interesting presentation. I learned the future will be in combining social communities with online publishing and data publishing, and find around the services a suite of solutions to combine all the elements and to raise the impact, not only being a researcher, also being your author, being your reviewer, being your editor. So very interesting, thank you very much. A question I have, I also want to invite listeners to pose questions via the chat function if they may to do so. And I would like to start with a question to Stephane, which really drives me. It's about the filter function, which normally a traditional publisher had, and I think this question comes up more burning in time of fake news and fabricated data. How does this new networking or new community, online community forming, avoid or act as a filter to fake data? Is there already an experience?
Yes, we're doing actually, you're tapping into 2 things. The possibility of using social media to be one possibly of filtering. So that's something that in the community is already being done. For example, preprints is certainly a model by which we're seeing an expansion in the scientific community. For example, Elsevier has recently acquired one preprint called SSRN. So that's one way to look at it, because the community can look at manuscripts very early on and really already define if there is interest in those manuscripts. Another way to look at it is the whole peer review system that many are calling in crisis, which I think with many others will remain a cornerstone exactly because of what you're describing. We're seeing so much alternative facts being put forward these days. I think peer review will remain very important. But the social media, such as Mendeley, we're using it to actually testbed open peer review. Another way of doing peer review that is more open, putting directly in connection the authors with the peer reviewers and the editor. And so we've done an experiment recently, last year actually, at Elsevier, that turned out to work really great. It was in 5 different journals, and the response rate and by the reviewers as well as the authors was really big, so big that we're going to now expand this to all of our journals and offer the possibility to authors and reviewers to do open peer review in any of our journals.
Mm-hmm. Open peer review, everybody can review, or how does this work?
Well, that's a very good question. No, I think that when it comes to, I like to remind the scientific community that they're very conservative themselves, and I don't think that a lot of scientists right now will agree to be reviewed by everyone in the street. What you're seeing, though, is the rise of altmetrics. So these are metrics that are not, again, directly linked with an article with a journal, but that are linked with social media. So again, there are features that we have on Mendeley or on Science Direct, Scopus, but also that others are developing on metrics, for example, is a company based in London. And they are offering new metrics that are based on the use, the dissemination, etc., of scientific articles on social media. So that's one thing you can imagine, is that in the future there might be, of course, a bigger impact of those metrics when in the evaluation of researchers, therefore bringing in the point of view of a wider crowd, you may say. But be careful, because of course you're never too far from some of the negative effect that you have seen with social media, and that some have complained about, be it Uber or some Travelocity, etc. So let's be careful about this. We need to research into it.
Yeah, I mean, bluntly spoken, somebody can hire a bot and raise the figures of its follower community dramatic, but it's done by bots, and who will judge this? So would you agree, or what's your opinion, that a classic peer review, maybe it's more open to new groups, but it is a peer review of quality reviewers, it is still the outstanding quality feature of a research paper? Would you agree on that, or is it still already changing?
No, I think I would still agree with you in the sense that I think today, at least, that's what I'm getting from the community. I was just last week at an event organized by Swisscore here in Brussels, where there were a lot of different points of view that were shared there. But the one consensus I felt was that peer review was probably there to stay. Is it going to evolve? Probably. But I think that scientific peer review is going to be a cornerstone for the validity, for the quality of what is being published. And so that's where I think there's still a very important role for publishers to be played in the future.
Mm-hmm. I have a question, if I may, to Federica, dealing with citizen science and open science as such. There are also platforms offered by the EU, like this open air platform. Do you have experiences with that?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, open air, it's something that Stephane also mentioned while he was talking about repositories. So, yeah, a platform like open air, it's a platform that basically aggregates content and data from other repositories. So it serves as a platform that brings all the content in one place. There are different experiments of this kind also on national level. I think it's a way, of course, of disclosing the content in one go. I think, though, that if we want to look into the value of sharing content and data, I think the future it's into platforms that are even more elaborate, I'd say. So what Stephane was talking about was, sharing actually should have much more than just sharing the content and data, but should look into, how we can make sure that we support collaboration, for instance, how we can make sure that we support also multidisciplinary research. So I think that the future it's more into the direction of what we call the social network of science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there is this open air is a repository tool, a storage tool, but there is not this aspect of community building. Is that right? Did I understand?
Which is extremely important. This aspect of community building, that's what we see, and that's the next level of communication, or scholarly communication, and that's what we are happy to facilitate and to provide the service around. But you also touch upon citizen science. I think this is also another extremely important topic, because indeed, there is an element which is, open science also look at how we can make sure that the impact of science reach also not only the academic community, but also the citizens at large. And this is, I think, it's another very interesting area to look into. And that's why it's also part of the pillar of the open science strategy at the level of the Commission, because there is so much that can be done. Also, as publisher, we are also very much involved in this area, because we do we have the opportunity to make sure that some of the research that is published with us can be really translated and make really accessible to citizens in a form and a language which is easier for citizens to understand. And I could talk really long about the many initiatives we have in this area, really to translate content in a layman language. And again, could be the platforms in the future are also the place where also the citizen science collaboration and dialogue is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned translation of content. So we are dealing in COMBIBIS with bioeconomy, and the bioeconomy is not yet well understood. Do you think the main deficiency might be the less translation into popular language, or is there another reason for that?
Well, I think there is a large opportunity in translating the scientific research in a more, as you define it, the popular language. I mean, I do see, for instance, we are approached by different organizations. I was a few years ago approached here from patients organizations in the Netherlands, where they were really saying, you know, how can we make sure the patients are really reached by the content? I mean, they really know what's going on in specific areas of interest. Like, for instance, I'm thinking about this diabetes organization. They really wanted to make sure that the knowledge really could go in almost in a direct form to the patients. So yes, I think that there is an opportunity that by translating the research content in a more easy to understand language, there is an opportunity that also, as you say, bioeconomics, for instance, that some concept and some way of thinking could be really more easily adapted by larger communities.
Okay.
But if I may here, Sylvia, I think this raises another interesting point, which is the reward system.
Yeah.
As you mentioned at the start, we're still in a reward system that very much relies, for example, on H-index citations, etc. What we're starting to see happening is that more metrics are coming. You mentioned earlier, and we talked about all metrics, but I think that until the funders, until the universities, for example, link the promotion of researchers to other metrics, such as, for example, their involvement in society, their reach out to society, we won't see those changes taking place that fast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. At least the reward and the grant system, which also has to move to new levels, you mentioned. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes, you mentioned in one of your slides that there will be connections in these open publishing communities to grants, to funders, also to patent organizations. Still, I mean, this has to be made public, and this has, as you said, be rewarded. So far, the scientific community actually dismisses people who are filing patents. What is your experience with that?
Well, I mean, again, when it comes to patents, I think what's interesting is a review system there. But I'm not as knowledgeable, for example, in patents that I am in the publishing. But when it comes to patents, a patent examiner will look at a patent wherever it comes from. And it can, you know, I was surprised, I don't have the numbers in my head anymore, but be it, I think, in Europe or in the United States, the biggest number of patents that are being written, submitted, are always from private individuals. So yeah. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm sure that yes, there might be many of those that are never granted, but there will be, I'm sure, others that are. So it's quite interesting to see the parallel there. I've never thought about it this way, but it's interesting you raised that point.
Mm-hmm. And maybe also, if I can say, because we talked about rewards, also when I was talking about research data management, open data, I think that indeed was an important point to be made as well, that, you know, what is required also to make this data ecosystem to work is really that the incentives for researchers are there, because what we see is that currently researchers are still quite reluctant to share the data. I mean, most of the times data remains, you know, either in the drawer of the researchers or they are lost after the researcher, you know, left the university. So incentives is definitely another very important challenge to be put in place, and it's something that will for sure help yeah, making sure that, you know, a journey towards effective data management will be effective at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, incentives doesn't mean just, doesn't mean just that it is, how to put it, the reward system. But for example, one of the things that Fede showed you earlier was the lab notebook, the electronic lab notebook. I can tell you most of my work when I did my postdoc or a PhD was either on a paper lab book or on a, you know, on a computer drive, on a floppy disk at the time, on a DVD. Today, with a system like this, what's really great is that I can do my experiment and go and pull a method that is somewhere, modify some of it right there, then do my experiment based on that, and have the lot number also in there, then take a picture of my gel directly with my tablet. And then once it's in there, I have the metadata that's necessary to be able to share that beyond. And so it makes it really smooth and easy for a researcher to share the data, because you don't have to add anything more to it. It's already something you can share with your PI, with other people in your lab, and if you want, with the rest of the world. So you're taking away some barriers, some burden that will make it easier for researchers to do their work and to start sharing much more.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting what you're telling, so it's a much more comfortable and convenient way to work. On the other side, also important might be for the bioeconomy, when it comes into health research, there are some clinical data, clinical studies, when you have combined projects, private-public partnerships, you have clinical studies which are to biggest share paid by pharma industry, and they are reluctant to share this data, especially on an open platform. How can you handle that? I mean,
so it's two different things. I mean, you're touching upon two very important aspects of open data, and let me say that policymakers, as far as I know, are very well aware of that. One is, of course, IP. Which is one important aspect, and another one is the anonymization of data, so the patient's data, personal data. So all of this, of course, within the world of open research data, now I insist on open research data, is something that is looked into and needs to be very carefully looked at, because of course, when it comes, for example, to funding, public funding, it's quite clear, for example, from Horizon 2020, and what Commissioner Moedas has put forward for the second half of Horizon 2020, that all publicly funded research through Horizon 2020 will have to be made open. That said, as you described, many companies are involved. And so, you know, where do we go with the IP that could come out of that? So those are interesting questions. And the other obvious one is, of course, clinical data, where there is a patient, but beyond that, psychologists are also looking at. I'm personally starting a research project where we are going to be doing interviews, and I love my data to be open. But since I will be interviewing specific people, I am wondering how I can I share all this? I certainly will need a consent form, and then once I still have the consent form for those who refuse, if I publish and if I make the data of the interview open, even if it's anonymized, just like DNA, the answers can lead very easily to whoever it is. So those things are being thought about. I don't have an answer for you today, but those are certainly important to raise.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. So we see there is still a lot of black boxes around. There's still a lot to be solved to make these new fantastic instruments to the benefit of all, and not disadvantaging and doing harm to some people who wanted to be opened, but who might have been also victim or exposed to some other streamings, because there are also other parts of the world who have a different understanding of how to treat public accessible data, I believe. So there is plagiarism, which is a big word, I think, in science, and there is also, industrial and IPRs, which are to be protected if we do not want to destroy business models. But we could touch and discuss, I think, a lot of longer and a lot of more topics. I think it was wonderful to have you both with us today for our webinar. I still ask some participants out there if they have questions. It's now the moment to raise your hand. Unhappily, I don't see any questions in the moment, but there may come up more because this session was recorded. It will be uploaded to YouTube. It will be accessible via our website. And here on the last slide, you have all our contact details. If you have any questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to send us an email. So thank you very much, Stephane. Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you for all viewers and participants to our webinar. There will be more. There will come up more webinars. But first, be aware that we will have our annual CombiBiz event on the 21st of February in London. There is still time and there are still some few places to register. We would be happy to welcome you in London. Thank you very much.